Hi there. Today is day 21, which is November 14th. The objective here is to transition from the poster to the web text. It'll be obvious, I think, as they work through it, that the web text is a more developed, more polished version of the research that they presented in the poster, which by its nature is a bit schematic. But it should draw on a lot of the same skills that they had to use for that, namely writing in a tone appropriate for the audience that they're working with, different in a poster and a website, but still that translation element is important, and of course visual and user design. Not quite the same in a static poster and a website that might have multiple pages on it, but it's a more difficult version of the same kind of task they've been working on. So there's a worksheet to go with this today that you'll hand out as homework. You'll find it on Canvas. I'll show you in a second. And of course you can edit that as you see fit. The day starts out, I suggest if you cued them to this last time with an extension project showcase, show and tell kind of thing, I would just bring up the blog on the projector, go to the tab or go to the category for extensions and have those there to see, and then go around the whole room and have people say if they have one up there, and then you could look at it very briefly and say, what was it about? How difficult was it to do? How does it connect to the topic of our course? Just some very quick stuff like that. Or they could say, I'm not doing extensions, actually. This would also be a nice moment to consider the projects they're going to do before the 30th, and to remind them that the 30th is only 2 weeks away, and that they can only turn in projects once per week. So they've only got 2 more possible unless they're turning one in this week. Count the timing on that. I may have that off. Anyway, from there, I would spend just a little bit of time talking about basic setting up their WordPress sites for their web text. Some of them may have already started doing this, in which case they can lead the way a little bit. You can ask who has, and see how they've approached it, what they've done so far. I think someone is putting together a sort of scavenger hunt for this that'll lead them through the stuff that they need to do, which is quite smart. But just reading through the binder, you'll get sort of a walkthrough of the basics. One thing to remember here is that WordPress is an open source platform that has a whole lot of users, and there are forums and videos for just about anything students might want to do. Our WordPress server doesn't have everything, but it has quite a few features that they might want to make use of, and for the really techie folks who want to work with CSS or HTML, they can, and the forums will help with that. All else fails, send them to the STC. That's where the WordPress server is hosted. AJ Bars has that. He's sort of the runner of the WordPress. So they can help with design features and usability features over there, and they should make good use of that. Next thing to do, and this is the last thing on the schedule because you're going to give them some work time, is to talk about the genre of web text. What makes a web text a web text? In general, you can just think of a web text as a website. It's just a website with an academic argument to it. It's a website that is a piece of scholarship, self-contained. They'll be reading from a journal that publishes web text for homework, but here what I suggest you do is open up on the projector the Digital Rhetorics Collective website, look at their list of best web texts of the month, and actually do some in-class work analyzing what they're seeing, how they work, what makes them perhaps the best of the month. So you can, they also have a really interesting definition of web text up there. Before class, I would just suggest spending a little bit of time on that website and deciding how you want to introduce them to this genre. The main points for them to come to are that the design features have a scholarly purpose, not just for show or for fun, but that it contributes to the meaning of the text somehow. Maybe really explicitly, maybe sort of implicitly, and that can be the big question here, is how much does the design matter to what this piece is trying to say? So go through that a little bit together. That probably takes 10 or 15 minutes. Again, the question is audience. And in fact, since they've just finished working on their posters, this is a great time to compare those audiences and how they approach speaking to an audience in the last piece and how they could envision speaking to an audience in this piece to come, and how those things might be different from each other, how they might be similar to each other. There's no one answer to that, of course, but it's good fodder for some free writes if you want to work out some free write prompts for that. From there, you can click on over to Kairos, which is a journal of rhetoric, technology, and pedagogy. The link to it is on our Canvas site. It takes you directly to the archives of all previous issues of Kairos. Again, I'd suggest just clicking around it a little bit to familiarize yourself. So I made you a handout. On the one side is a whole lot of text that sort of walks them through the idea of these web texts, the idea of what Kairos does, and shows them an example, which is a piece from 2016 that has 13 different pages within the larger web text, incorporates multimedia. It's just a representative example of the kind of stuff they're going to encounter. You've probably gone over that pretty well in the last activity of what makes a web text, but this will be a good reminder for them afterward too. And then on the other side is another sort of scholarly response worksheet, which is there for you to edit. Much like Young Scholars in Writing, it guides them through the things to pay attention to. In this case, it asks them to talk about what the thing's about, how it's designed, how the topic and the design might interact with each other, or at least what the author might have been going for, and then whether they found any design tricks that they either might want to use or definitely don't want to use because they didn't like them. It also holds students accountable for using MLA format in their citation of the piece, which it gives a little primer on at the bottom. So that is their main homework. The other things... I'd like you to assign them a year or a range of years to look at. Otherwise, they might just all choose articles from recent years, and then you would have less diversity in what they come up with. So whatever you did for Scholars in Writing, do it again here to make sure that they cover a spread. Some folks should talk about ones from 10 years ago. They're still interesting to look at. So that's just a suggestion there. The other thing that you're doing today is to give them time to actually start working on their web text. So that means starting their WordPress site if they haven't already. That means, as I'm saying it, you could probably flip those things around where you end the day with the WordPress setup stuff so that you can go straight into it. But give them time to start working on that. Give them time to pick out their Kairos pieces if that's what they're doing. If you're working in a lab, it's easier, of course. If you're not working in a lab, then they can talk about the aesthetics that they want, the web page design that they're thinking of, what they can work analog on planning this thing out so that when they do get the chance to sit down and start working, they'll be prepared to. And that's about it. This one has a few things that it's really a good idea to run through once or twice yourself just to make sure you're comfortable with the web text you want to show them, with the Kairos website so you sort of know where you're going. You might even have some tabs open, but it's mostly a day for transitioning from the poster to start them working on the web text.